Are you a talented artist? Or are you passionate about a topic you want to discuss? But money can be very hard to find for an upcoming artist. Don't worry, Studio Mashinani has got your back. Sign up on ajira.co.ke to book a session with your music and video producers across the country. Work on your music, jingles, spoken words, and even podcasts to realize your dream. All for free. Studio Mashinani, Radani Talent.
Tumekuwa kwa ngori ever since yaanze. Hakuna kitu nakupatia.
Kila kitu iko sawa?
Yu ni mwizi. I think I need to leave.
Kuingia ni rahisi sana, lakini kutoka ni uchawi.
I got your back.
Nimetafuta kwa bedroom yangu kila mahali na sioni.
Mara mwisho ulikuwa nayo wapi?
So how do we go about this?
I have worked so hard to get here, so I can't give up. Haiwezi.
Na kafadi kwa gani? Kwani si sister yako?
Can I talk to you?
Mrembo, ongea tu.
Alone. Baba Jina amepiga na watu wa bank.
What?
Sitiko makara mabeshte. Umesahau. Alex, unaona 2 steps ahead, eh?
Cynthia Wamboi Njoroge is an upcoming professional welder at Toolkit, a digital social enterprise training in technical skills and welding, or what is commonly known as Jua Kali. But Wamboi tells us this is not typical Jua Kali because the use of virtual reality has enhanced her grasp of welding techniques and has also debunked myths related to blending learning programs that are complemented by technology.
With time, it's not that hard. It's easy. As you go, as you continue practicing, it's so much easy. You gain your muscle memory. So the moment when you come, you join the workshop, you are able to maintain your memory and also the stability during welding. When you start with the VR, it's much easier when you come to the workshop.
Wamboi is not alone. Her colleague Peter Kuria Mungai cites time and unique upskilling as the reason for choosing VR in welding.
I started with virtual reality, where we are engaged in a controlled stimulated environment, the same as a workshop, but it's in a controlled stimulated environment, where I gained a skill in virtual reality, and I really passed. I had a pass mark of 89.
The learning experience begins here, using a wearable headset, a unique handheld controller, customized to mimic a welding gun. The controller has a series of buttons which helps the user select options in the virtual world, while the headset acts as the wearer's eyes in this digital reality. These devices take you to a virtual world safely projected on computers, which display what the VR wearer of the devices sees and controls in the virtual world.
So as you can see on your screen, he's welding. So you are able to select the required sample. You adjust the parameters, you set the parameters, you set the current, you set the gas. Like I've said, MIG welding entails the use of gas. So once he or she is ready to weld virtually, there are all the welding specifications that are required. This one will give you the experience of the real MIG welding gun. Yes, the weight of the gun. Okay, so this one acts as a counterweight.
However, as groundbreaking as it may be, there are still major issues to consider.
The biggest challenge and the call for first to the government is model the curriculum for assessment to be able to catch higher levels such that our trainees are qualified internationally.
The appeal for these tools in various needs seem not to be waning as technology continues to make work easier. Virtual reality environments like the ones we've seen here for welding safeguard against a lot of costs overruns, especially when it comes to safety and the overall cost of programs like this. And now experts say that this can be replicated in other industries like this one. Alan Oko, Tech One.
For example, I have a system over here. The system is wireless.
Behold the world of an automated house.
And control the entire house from here.
From wireless cameras to spatial speakers and automated switches, these are the devices that are powering the house of the future, thanks to the concept of the Internet of Things, or IoTs.
So there is the lounge or the family room area, there is a kitchen area, and there is, of course, a bedroom on the other side. So different zones for lighting. But besides that, when we talk of a smart home, is an intelligent home whereby all your low voltage devices are speaking one language.
Kevin Nyota and Abubakar Swale from Audiovisual Control Systems show us how a typical home setup is controlled from a single point, such as your mobile phone.
It comes on, and I can also just put it off. There is a speaker here, so I can say, let's say, the music to come on. So it's just mimicking that there is an active thing that is going on, so it literally comes on. And now we go to lights themselves individually. So there is a floor lamp, which is this one here. It's here externally here. So if I say the lamp to come on, it comes on, but I can also dim it. So right now it's 100%. I can dim it to, let's say that is 20%. Yeah. Besides that, I can also, let me just put it 100%, and I can change the color temperature on it. Right now is warm white. I can switch to daylight, and then the color changes.
As much as they are connected to the same circuit, I can control one fitting at a time. So if, say that, and I just want to control this particular fitting over here, so all I do is just turn this on. So this one, it will be on, and then if I want to increase the intensity, I will increase the intensity.
Consumers who have used this technology speak of savings and convenience and what the government could do to make such systems available for Kenyans from all backgrounds.
Maybe to make the business environment better, the issue of taxes, if they could be looked at, because a lot of people or a lot of things become expensive when there is a lot of taxes that accumulate to that. So the government could help in that way.
Technology's contribution to the country's gross domestic product grew by an average of 9.9% in 2022, making it the second fastest growing sector after the hospitality industry. The Internet of Things is taking the world by storm, and Kenya is not being left behind, with audio-visual systems totally automated coming devolved into your household like this one. Alan Oko, Tech One.
very good morning to you. Thank you very much for watching KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Byron Abuli is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Over the next 2 hours, we shall be having conversations on matters money as well as farming. The first conversation is the 2025 economic or rather investment outlook, and we shall be talking to Ronnie Choka, who is the senior research analyst at Capital A Investment Bank. That conversation is the first one. The second one, we shall be discussing pig farming. As a pig farmer, what do you need to do to ensure that you thrive in your trade? And now we get into that first conversation on matters the 2025 investment outlook. Ronnie, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Right. We can start with the global situation first of all. Let's discuss 2024. And the global growth, it's steadied at 3.3%, or rather you expect it to be at 3.3% in 2025. How was 2024 like?
I think to contextualize 2024, I think there are very few years where we've seen as high volatility as we did in 2024. For instance, Kenya, for example, oscillated from the worst performing equities market in the sub-Saharan Africa space to the best performing market in 2024 in USD terms. That's just to show you the volatility across the market. Not only that, even in the fixed income space, we saw treasury yields oscillate by as high as 6% up and then down by the end of the year. So last year was very volatile. Furthermore, globally, we came in from a regime at the start of 2024 where interest rates were very high, interest rates were very tight. Inflation was also at multi-decade highs across the world. Geopolitical tensions were also high, given that the legacy effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and later on the Middle East tensions also rose about. It was in that context where we also had a historic wave of elections across the world, which promised a host of changes in diplomatic relations and also trade policies. And now stepping into 2025, or as we came to the end of 2024, what we saw was inflation cool down to single-digit levels across the world. That was an encouraging sign. Even key central banks now had the legroom to lower interest rates. Even funneling closer home, we saw our central bank now lowering interest rates in the latest iteration to 10.75%.
Right. So as we now come closer home, the sub-Saharan Africa region, you mentioned the Kenya shilling appreciating, it appreciated 17.4% against the dollar, the strongest performance in the year. Nigeria was the worst. Ghana and Egypt also had problems there. So for sub-Saharan Africa, 3.8% growth last year, you're projecting 4.2%. What will be driving this?
Okay, that growth projection is usually derived from the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Outlook published in January this year, whereby they cited that in the sub-Saharan Africa region, we are noticing a wave of stability, so to say. Compared to 2023, we had conflicts in the Sudan region and the Chad region. I know the conflicts in the Sudan region are yet to be concluded, but at the moment, we can say we are at a better footing on average. We've seen East Africa region growth hold up relatively well, and so was this growth in the South Africa region. However, if we look at West Africa, growth was a bit muted, owing to the very high inflation rates. For instance, Nigeria, in Ghana, we've seen devaluations of their respective currencies, which has resulted in imported inflation. The kind of which we also saw in our home scenario, I think back in 2022, 2023, when the exchange rate had depreciated almost to a peak of around 160. At that time, inflation was heading into the strong double digits. But thankfully, for the Kenya case, we were able to navigate our exchange rate back to stability. Our balance of payment position was enhanced. Our forex reserves position lifted to $9.2 billion, which is more than enough to cover 4 months of import cover. So all in all, I think the outlook for the sub-Saharan Africa region is pegged on lower interest rates, which will stimulate private sector investment spending. We're seeing recovering consumer demand, meaning we are phasing out the legacy effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Yes.
The 17.4% rise of the Kenya shilling, what drove that? And are we going to see, or rather, what do you foresee for this year in terms of the Kenya shilling performance?
Okay, our exchange rate outlook is rather conservative. We think the exchange rate will remain stable until the end of the year. We've seen an improvement in macroeconomic indicators from inflation. Inflation has really cooled down or softened to the latest metric coming at 3%. We've seen also our forex reserves position has really solidified. We were trailing below the 4 months of import cover necessary. However, right now we are above that. Imports are now recovering, and the nature of imports is also something we also look at. We are now noticing a rise in capital expenditures on machinery and equipment, which is a good thing because now it shows businesses are optimistic on consumer demand. Now that interest rates are coming down, it's even all the more better, since we'll see now banks extending more credit to the private sector. It is envisioned that banks will extend that same benefit of lower interest rates to consumers. Yeah.
The Kenyan economy, it slowed in 2024 to about 4.5%.
Yes.
How did we get to that number?
So last year, growth was plagued by a number of challenges. Number one, inflation was very high. So prices were skyrocketing on a year-on-year perspective, which presented a number of challenges. Firstly, consumer demand was challenged. Consumers had to now reprioritize their spending to necessities only, meaning other sectors such as tourism and even manufacturing came under pressure. We saw, according to the PMI reports by Stanbic Bank Kenya, we've seen businesses accumulate on inventory which are not, turning over. So that was a very big challenge for businesses. A number of businesses shut down, as you are well aware. Another thing we saw is that demand was largely challenged by, the uncertainty. Even if you look at the CEO surveys by the Central Bank of Kenya, inflation expectations in the future were also as high. It did not help either that interest rates were also very tight. We saw banks lending as high as 27% per annum, which is very, very tight to serve. Very few businesses can deliver such a return to service the interest and still make profits. So generally, economic activity slowed down. There was extensive crowding out of the private sector, given that government was borrowing heavily from the investment space. So we saw government even borrow as high as 18%. So if banks are given an investment of 18% risk-free, what's the incentive to lend to the private sector? So that was a big challenge. Hopefully, thankfully, to the Central Bank of Kenya's credit, that situation has been reversed. And now we are waiting for the funnel-through effects in the form of lower interest rates. We think that should stimulate growth going forward, especially for the manufacturing sector, which was almost grinding to a halt, with growth coming at 0.6% in Q3 last year.
Of course, you've mentioned manufacturing. Another strong sector is the agriculture as well as the services industry. They are quite some supporters of the Kenyan economy. And these were still in the red, right?
Yes, growth slowed down generally across all sectors. Agriculture slowed down, and so did services. Manufacturing was the most notable slowdown. We grew by the slowest pace, not only here at home, but regionally. In East Africa, manufacturing is really slowing down. Its contribution to GDP is also shrinking to now as of 2024, that contribution shrunk to 7%. We were as high as 15% 5 years ago, contribution to GDP, but now that has shrunk progressively to 7%. But on the flip side, services contribution has really grown. It employs the largest percentage of Kenyans. And for instance, we're seeing bright prospects in the tourism sector, where domestic tourism is now coming to the forefront. As per the latest statistics by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, we are seeing the highest contribution to tourism, or let's say domestic hotel bookings, is coming from domestic tourists and not from foreign tourists, which is now a good sign, meaning our industry is coming of age. We don't need to rely externally now so much for our tourism growth. And it can only get better from here.
Right, and of course that is one of the positive lessons that the industry took from COVID-19 when they had to adjust and start depending on the domestic tourists, right?
Precisely.
Right. The issue of the dip in manufacturing, let's just stay there a little bit. Does it mean that we are not consuming locally? What is driving this dip?
So there are a number of factors. I'm looking at it two-way. On the demand side,
right.
Consumers are reprioritizing spending, or have been reprioritizing their spending to necessities. So meaning spending on non-essential goods, or what may be perceived as luxury items by most households, has dwindled. And it's a function of the real incomes. Nominal wages have stagnated, while inflation has been eating up into the real purchasing power of Kenyans. So that has meant, for now the manufacturing companies, slower and slower growth in revenues, given that demand has been challenged. On the supply side, manufacturers have been facing or contending with inflationary pressures as well. On the raw materials they require for their production, their prices have been soaring as well, across all industries. And that also now presents a challenge. It eats into their profit margins, as you can imagine. So on the top line, you have slowing revenues, and on the cost side, you have rising costs. So your margin function has been shrinking over and over until some businesses are basically wiped out. Small and medium-sized businesses have come under a lot of pressure. Actually, it's only large cap or large size businesses that have emerged unscathed relatively from the COVID era to now. Yeah.
So it has been a very tough time for SMEs.
It has been a very tough 5 years since 2019. However, we are seeing bright prospects from here. We are seeing signs of recovery. Now that inflation is coming down, we expect now that benefit to trickle to consumers, in the sense that their purchasing power will improve relatively. We'll start seeing them demanding more and more goods. Tourism will again continue to grow by a stronger rate domestically. And even now, given our positioning globally, Kenya has been marketed as a very attractive tourist destination. So that is also another benefit we need to leverage on to propel ourselves forward. Agriculture, on the agriculture front, we've seen slower growth as compared to 2023. Last year, in as much as we didn't have a drought, we didn't have super normal, or above average weather conditions to stimulate the growth in output that we did in 2023. However, and also, when we consider the fact that the exchange rate appreciated in 2024, that meant exporting farms only received much lower earnings from their sales, now given that the exchange rate had appreciated. So it's a function of also the global markets, given it's highly competitive. And, there's a very strong hypothesis that usually states that the contribution of developing countries to the global output in value terms shrinks as compared to countries, let's say in developed economies, which are able to add value to the agricultural output. So they have a higher pricing power. They command a bigger share of the global, let's say, coffee output value compared to, let's say, Kenya, which only, exports raw coffee beans with only minimal value added. So we find we don't have a stronger pricing power because now we are competing with Brazil, we are competing with India, which are also mega producers of the same output. So it's a highly competitive space, low pricing power, meaning you can only increase your earnings by growing your output. As compared to developed economies who by adding value to their output are then able to command higher prices and thereby command a higher total output from the whole value chain.
And why can't Kenya do that? I mean, it's 2025. Why are we not adding value to our produce as opposed to just exporting raw material?
So it's been a subject of continuous debate, even in the academic circles. We should basically, it's the intuitive solution, to basically build capacity, the necessary capital expenditure, so that we are able to add value to our exports. And that's a continuous debate. We've seen the government also strengthen the package of incentives to export processing zones, including tax exemptions, so that they're able to make the necessary investments in machinery and equipment to add value. But it's going to take time because now, even as we grow our technology function, even developed countries are also strengthening their value proposition, their automation, and it's a race against time, really. What will be the defining factor, in my view, has to be the level to which we are able to speed up or intensify. In fact, it should be a policy priority for the National Treasury to really strengthen our value proposition insofar as value addition to our agricultural output is concerned.
Right. Let's spend a little time on inflation. Headline inflation eased from 7.7% in 2023, that's an average, to 4.5% in 2024. Core inflation, there was a slight decrease from 3.9% to 3.5%. Let's start here. What is the difference between headline inflation and core inflation?
Great. So maybe I can start with core inflation.
Right.
So core inflation measures the changes in prices of items such as, the cost you pay for, let's say, this glass of water, these spectacles today versus a year ago, It measures changes in prices of services as well, the cost of taking a taxi, for example, and so on and so on, except now for food items and fuel items, which tend to be more volatile. Those ones are measured separately from the core inflation. So core inflation tracks the changes in prices of goods and services, with the exception of food and fuel, whereas now the non-core inflation, which has been rebased, or let's say revised in January this year by the KNVS, now that tracks the changes in prices of food and fuel items, which are more volatile, and food also comprises the highest percentage of the CPI basket. So that's the major difference between those two inflationary metrics. And just to comment on the trends, we've seen now headline inflation coming down. Headline inflation is now the average of the two. It's the average of the non-core inflation and the core inflation, which has been on the downtrend. And we credit this to, firstly, we've seen a rebound in food supplies. We are no longer importing as much food as we did in 2023, which is a subject that the central bank governor commented on in the latest MPC iteration. We've also seen fuel prices come a bit lower compared to last year. For instance, petrol was retailing as high as 195 last year. This year, we've seen it have averaged down to around 176, 177 for petroleum. That reflects the general trend for petroleum products, including gas as well, which now we do anticipate will sustain at that level. Now that the exchange rate has stabilized, we do not anticipate that there will be other disruptions other than geopolitics that can upset the inflation picture. So we expect inflation to average at around 4 to 4.5% this year. Yes.
When you say inflation has come down, generally people assume prices have come down. That is what people assume, right?
Yes.
But the reality is different, right?
Yes. So when you talk of inflation slowing down, it does not mean prices have necessarily come down. What it may imply is that it's only the pace at which prices are rising has slowed down. Yeah. The other aspect you're referring to, where prices decline, is called a deflation.
Right.
Deflation, and it has actually happened in January. Now, for fuel, we saw a deflation in prices. Yeah. So, but when we do the weighted average of all products in the CPI basket, including food, we saw a mild inflation of 3%. Yes.
Right. And what are you foreseeing for this year in terms of inflation, considering that last year there was a lot of weakened consumer demand?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this year, our inflation outlook on the external front, insofar as the imports we rely on, the fact that the exchange rate has been stable over the past 6 months and running implies that the cost at which we import our machinery, our textiles, and so on, is expected to remain stable. So that should allow for predictable planning by businesses insofar as importing the goods and services are concerned. They can now extend even the benefit of lower, basically stable margins, and now that will imply fixed, stable and predictable prices to consumers as a result. As compared to the scenario last year when the exchange rate was weakening every week. You see the weakening, the exchange rate losing as high as 1% every week. That was very volatile. Businesses were, on their heels, having to revalue their goods upwards every week as well to keep up with the changing dynamics. And that is really bad for business environment, because if consumers also can't have the certainty that I'll purchase the same loaf of bread tomorrow as I did yesterday, that upsets the whole economy, in terms of both businesses and consumers. Stability is really good. I usually say consumer confidence is even worth much more than money itself.
Right. You've mentioned consumer confidence. A lot of times people go shopping and they're like, just look at what I bought for 1,000. This could have been maybe double the size last year or 2 years ago. So for this year, do you think that consumer demand is going to rise?
There are a number of factors to this.
Yeah.
For one, we have to look at the wage function. Nominal wages have been growing very slowly, an average of 6% last year. Nominal wages on average. When you look at inflation, on the other hand, that one has been decelerating, which is a good sign. That means now when we look at the real purchasing power, after we deflate, or after we filter out inflation effects, that would mean the real purchasing power is slowly improving. That should mean if that trend persists, consumers should start feeling, the wealth effect. Money is, increasing in their pockets. But you need many more consecutive quarters of stability, like 4 consecutive quarters of stability in prices for consumers to start feeling the wealth effect and now be confident to spend more out of their disposable incomes. However, for the time being, whereby nominal wages or the per capita incomes have been growing, albeit very slowly, we think it will take a very long time for consumer confidence to pick up to the strength it did in the decade of 2010s to 2020.
So how is that going to impact businesses?
So for businesses, it depends on the industry, but the general trend, we think businesses will have to keep their overheads low, if at all they are to remain in business. This is because consumer demand isn't projected to pick up strongly, at least not for in the short term. There's still uncertainties in the geopolitical space, which are also a factor to consider. Crude oil can, oscillate as much as it did in 2022, which can present additional headwinds to consumer spending power. But to the extent now the global economy is also stabilizing, interest rates are coming down, I think we are easing into a recovery. We can now say with growing confidence, we are seeing, we can say with more confidence that we are phasing away the legacy effects of the COVID pandemic. We are seeing an improvement even in the capital markets. Equity turnover is really soaring to, for the first time in around 6 years of consecutive decline. Even investor optimism, as signaled by the market indices and also the price to earnings ratio of the NSE, they are signaling investor optimism. They're signaling a renewed outlook of improved performance for corporates, but we think it will take slightly longer. That's why in our growth outlook, we've kept our forecast low. We forecast GDP to grow at 4.4% in 2025. And the other factor, in as much as interest rates are coming down by the CBK, we've seen banks also, hesitate to lower the same rates or extend the same benefits to consumers. The central bank governor iterated that there'll be even punitive measures for banks who do not comply with the directive to lower interest rates. But this comes in a context where non-performing loan ratios in our market are in the strong double digits, averaging at 16% last year. Now, to compensate for that risk, on the commercial banks' perspective, they have to compensate for that risk through higher pricing of interest rates. That's why in their risk-based pricing models, riskier borrowers are charged higher compared to the less risky borrowers. So that is also a dynamic that the central bank has to navigate. It's not necessarily true that because you've lowered, let's say, the cash reserve requirement for banks, that banks will extend the same credit to the private sector. Because what the trend we're looking at in the capital markets is that we're seeing domestic borrowing is even growing by the day. We've seen supplementary budget 2 estimates which project increased borrowing to 862 billion shillings in this fiscal year. And when you take cognizance of the fact that, there's the extensive crowding out effect when government borrows more from the private sector, it can only be expected then that banks will continue to be very cautious in lending to the private sector. They wouldn't want to take up on excessive risk in such an environment where consumer demand is not where it was prior to the pandemic. Yes.
Yeah, so when you mentioned the issue of banks and the CBK on matters rates,
yes.
Once CBK was like, there'll be some punitive measures here, some banks released that, they've lowered the rates by this much. but plus the risk part of it, and they were not capping that, so it could still be high, right? And you do understand why banks are behaving like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Now let's talk about geopolitical environment. Last year there were a lot of elections across the world, and one of the biggest changes was in the US. Now there's a new president, Donald Trump, and he has come in with very protectionist policies, tariffs left, right, and center. And how is this going to impact our markets? How is it going to impact us? You might be hearing about tariffs somewhere in Canada and US, but how is it going to impact Kenya?
Okay, so insofar as geopolitics is concerned, we've seen sweeping changes in not only the regimes, but even now the political philosophies they embody now mean there are gonna be clashes with other global factions. And you're seeing that materialize and continue to take shape in 2025. As you rightly point out, with the Trump 2.0, we're seeing tariffs now emerge more strongly. And, it's the games of global trade in the sense that, all countries would consider it in their best interest to maximize the most gains from trade compared to other countries. And that's the philosophy Trump is taking on. When they look at their trade balances, let's say with the European Union, they are noticing negative trade balances, meaning the Eurozone has been benefiting more from the trade interactions with the US. So Trump is looking to reverse that by, levying tariffs. They look to strengthen their domestic farms. Their ability to export at higher prices would mean higher even tax revenues for themselves and even for US corporates. And you can't argue with the ideology. It is economically rational. However, that clashes with the mainstream or let's say the contemporary global trade philosophy of globalization. When you levy more and more trade tariffs, you are increasing the barriers to trade, which in effect lowers the overall trade volumes. So the World Trade Organization has been understandably against that policy of higher tariffs because it tends to trigger retaliatory responses. So you get into this vicious cycle of, because you added tariffs to our exports, we are also levying tariffs on your exports as well. So it's a back and forth that tends to get into a very ugly level, if not unchecked. Yeah.
We saw when Russia-Ukraine happened, or when it started, because it's still ongoing.
Yes.
There were a lot of sanctions against Russia and all that, but somehow they still had some level of economic growth, over the past years. Do you think that US can self-sustain, so to say?
By and large, the diversity within the US economy itself is very, very strong. In fact, the contribution of global trade to the US's GDP is very minimal. They can very well self-sustain. Their oil reserves are very strong. They can, it's said that their oil reserves are enough to cover them for the next 100 years on the minimum. So that diversity in itself is a strength, whereby they wouldn't really suffer were they locked out from global trade or were they to operate in autarky, as we say. But we still need trade. We know countries can benefit from trade even if they don't have an absolute advantage in producing those goods. For instance, it is said developing economies like Kenya have a comparative advantage in, raw output, agricultural output like tea, coffee, and so on. We are more efficient cost-wise in that sector compared to developed economies. Who are more efficient in production of machinery, So we can both mutually benefit from trading with each other as compared to, autarky. We live by ourselves and they live isolated by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so how is this going to impact Kenya? Are we going to feel the effect of these tariffs as well?
What our outlook is that, for one, we are seeing the proposal to increase tariffs as high as 60% to Chinese exports and 25% to the rest of the world. That certainly upsets the global inflation picture in the sense that global trade is projected to decline. Now that prices are going to be higher, intuitively, demand will take a dent. That may also affect supply chain disruptions, especially if China retaliates again with the same countermeasure, let's say even a 50% tariffs on US exports as well. That would mean now if that Chinese goods, which we import a lot as a nation in Kenya, will become more expensive. That now would mean now these commodities we rely on, including textiles, plastics, and so on, will become more expensive to the Kenyan citizens. And consequently, the inflation cycle will now start rising, as opposed to how it is now, where it is, stabilizing at 3%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the more reason to grow our own manufacturing sector, right?
All the more reason.
Right. Yeah. So for the next 5 minutes or so, let's talk about Kenya's fiscal policy. Mm-hmm. We know that there was the introduction of the, one line of channeling all the government monies to. How did this impact the revenue collection last year?
All right. We've seen a decent improvement, actually, in tax collections as a result of the Treasury single account policy. We've seen appropriations in aid really grow by as high as 12% year on year. We are projecting to collect 484 billion in draw appropriations in aid alone. Right. Compared to the initial target of 420. So there is some benefit to the Treasury single account, and we can only hope the fiscal responsibility principles will remain true. And also noticing on the ordinary revenue front, we've noticed an average double-digit growth. Last year, revenues grew by 11% to now crossing the 2 trillion mark, which is a good sign. Mm-hmm. In as much as imports last year were, slowing down, meaning custom duty collections were, challenged. This year we are seeing a recovery in imports as well. On the export side, it's a function of competition. So we can't really raise our exports as much as we would wish to, unless now we add value to our exports. Mm-hmm. But insofar as our fiscal basket is concerned, we've seen promising growth. However, that same growth in revenues has been matched with even higher growth in recurrent expenditure, which almost now negates the collections, because now we'd expect now at least maintain spending constant, such that our fiscal deficit would be shrinking over time. Now we are projecting an expansion or a widening of the fiscal deficit to 4.9% of GDP in the 2024-2025 fiscal year, which now is at headwinds with not only our own thresholds, where we intend to minimize it to 3%. It also clashes with our debt covenants, for instance, with the IMF, whereby we want to lower our debt to GDP ratio to 55%. But now we are heading closer to 64% of GDP in present value terms. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we are looking at a 4.2 trillion shilling budget thereabout for this year,
yes,
according to what Treasury has been saying in the past few months. How is Kenya going to tame to find a balance, you know, between the revenue collection, because a lot of individuals, especially salaried individuals, feel like you know, they're really at the end of it. Businesses, as you said, majority who are SMEs are also struggling in that way. So how are we going to find a balance?
So at present, what you're seeing from the Treasury side, they are now on a policy of stimulating economic growth because they've noticed private sector lending has really dwindled to even a negative growth, meaning commercial banks have not been lending to the private sector as the government would wish them to. So, which is why now the Central Bank of Kenya has also been on a policy of lowering interest rates, signaling to commercial banks that, hey, right now, the economy, we've now settled the inflation front. Inflation has now cooled down. Now let's focus on the economy. Let's stimulate employment, raise the per capita income overall. And that now is what informs their policy of lowering interest rates and instructing central banks also to extend the same benefits to consumers. And added to that, they've increased the cash reserve requirement, or rather they've lowered the cash reserve requirement so that in effect, banks have more liquidity to lend to the private sector. That means hundreds of billions in Kenya shillings available for private sector borrowing. If that policy is to funnel through to its logical conclusion, then we should have a decent spurring in consumer demand. Businesses will have more confidence to, because it's usually a chain that trickles over and over, turns over and over until we have now the economic engines running, you know?
Right. So as we come to a close of the conversation, what would be your message to investors who are looking to invest in Kenya? Let's start with people who are looking to bring money in, and domestic investors who are looking for a place to put in their money.
Okay. So to investors looking to invest in Kenya, I think we are seeing promising signs of growth. Inflation has cooled down, as I've pointed out. Interest rates are also coming down, meaning you can borrow at favorable rates and invest. We've seen consumer demand slowly pick up. They're seeing signs of promise. We can confidently say we've phased out the COVID-19 effects. The exchange rate has been stable for the last 8 months and counting, and we expect it to remain stable until the end of the year. So I think we have all the conditions favorable to, you know, get the economic renaissance or revival that we've been waiting for. Exchange rate stability is actually very important for even foreign and even domestic investors. If you consider countries such as Nigeria, who have devalued their currency twice, in 2022, the exchange rate was around 400 naira to the dollar. Right now, we are looking at 1,600. That's a 40 times slide.
Yeah.
You can only imagine how prices have been disrupted. You have the prospect of buying something 40 times more than you did last year is just mind-blowing.
Right.
So that use case I've cited is for us to appreciate how much of exchange rate stability is important for businesses and consumers alike, and even in terms of forward planning.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ronnie. That is where we end the conversation. Asante sana for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much.
I have been speaking with Ronnie Choka, who is a senior research analyst at Capital A Investment Bank. We've been looking at the 2025 investment outlook, how 2024 was, and how this year is expected to be. This is BizCheck. We want to take a quick break. When we come back, we shall be talking about pig farming. Do stay with us.
Yeah. Are you coming back?
It won't be too long.
Is Jim being all right? Is it serious?
She has a mild concussion.
Can you drive?
Yes.
Then drive me to the hospital.
You're feeling sick?
No, I need to take care of something.
It's a big problem. Look, I was watching it just now. I really don't know which idiot uploaded the video of the shooting site online.
The affordable housing is a key plank of the government under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Under this project, the government seeks to construct 1 million houses, both social and affordable, by the year 2027. But this initiative has not been without challenges, both political and legal.
Yes, because so far I have 140,000. Of course, the question is, but you have done 2 years. Maybe Kenya should give me the benefit of a 1 year off, because you remember, the starting was very difficult. There was a lot of negativity. There were court cases and litigation, and we had not money to get the fund. Now we have a fund, which we are calling the Housing Levy Fund.
This week on Inside Government, we are talking to Housing Cabinet Secretary Alice Wahome. Our conversation will revolve around affordable houses, the challenges, the opportunities, and the way forward. Watch the conversation right here on KBC Channel 1 with me, O'Brien Kimani.
If I put it to you that ile makosa ulifanya nini niliwakataza, mambo ya boyfriend. How do you go to your boyfriend and you go to school? What is more important than
mimi sina boyfriend?
Huyu ni mtoto wako?
No, I'm the second parent now. Yes.
Second parent, yes. Lakini hii mambo namwambia ya hao maboyfriend ulijulia wapi?
Nilijua.
Na mbona hukufuatilia mzazi wake umwambie?
Kwa hivyo if I tell this honorable court that what you did, it was your own judgment. Ukafungia watoto nje. Will I be lying?
No.
Thank you.
Wewe ndio uliamua kufungia watoto nje wanafunzi.
Hapana, nilifuata masharti yake mheshimiwa.
Na sasa unasema yes. Kama uelewi sema sielewi.
Yeye haelewi na yeye ni principal.
Wacha nikwambie, kitu mbaya angefanyikia mmoja wao wanafunzi, hiyo kisugu yako angeisha.
Wait a minute, let me ask you.
Maswali umemaliza ya hii kesi.
Hali ambayo kwamba ni hali ambayo kwamba inabidi ufanye istighfari sana na kumwomba sana Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala na kukithirisha sana kuisoma Qur'ani, kwa sababu salafi salih bimaana masahaba na wanazuoni waliokuwa wema na hali ya mtume sallam walikuwa wakimwomba Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, masalafu wema waliotangulia miezi 6.
Na unapojiandaa katika kuingia katika mwezi wa Ramadhan, basi kama Waislamu tunapaswa kuhakikisha kuwa tumefanya mazoezi ya kufunga katika mwezi huu wa Shaaban.
حب النبي رحمة ودواء والقلب من نور ارتوى.
Tumekuwa kwa ngori ever since yaanze. Hakuna kitu nakupatia.
Kila kitu iko sawa?
Huyu ni mwizi. I think I need to leave.
Kuingiandaa ni rahisi sana. Ni uchawi.
I got your back.
Nimetafuta kwa bedroom yangu kila mahali na sioni.
Mara mwisho ulikuwa nayo wapi?
So how do we go about this?
I have worked so hard to get here, so I can't give up. Haiwezi.
Na haka fadi kwa gani? Kwani si sister yako?
Can I talk to you?
Mrembo, ongea tu.
Alone. Baba Jina amepiga na watu wa bank.
What? Sitiko makara mabeshte. Umesahau. Alex, unaona 2 steps ahead, eh?
Elimu ni taa inayoangaza giza linalojitokeza.
Unahisi kuwa
matatizo tunayoyapata ya nidhamu ama ya kinidhamu shuleni, tatizo ni wazazi ama ni wanafunzi?
Ni dhahiri shahiri kuwa wazazi wanachangia ukosefu wa nidhamu ya wanafunzi shuleni.
Unapata kwamba mzazi badala kuangalia mtoto wake kile ambacho anachofanya shuleni, yeye anachilia mtoto kujiangalia mwenyewe.
Vipi waiza kisomo?
Bungulu alikuwa anaendeleza utamaduni katika jamii.
Mwalimu wa pili kama vipi cheza kama wewe, mimi nimesepa, wanafunzi tundeni kazi.
Thank you very much for staying with KBC Channel 1. This is BizCheck and my name is Betty Kiptum. Brian Moraro is my colleague on the sign language interpretation for this second hour, where we shall be discussing pig farming. And today I have Dr. Victor Yamo, who is the CEO of Global One Health Advocacy Alliance, as well as Dr. Sharon Zigadi, who is the General Manager of Rosemark Division at Farmers Choice Limited. Thank you very much for joining me.
Asante Betty.
Karibuni sana. So I will throw this question to you, Dr. Zigadi.
Yes.
Let's start with where pig farming is in Kenya right now.
Pig farming in Kenya, thank you first of all, Betty, for
Right.
having me on the show. It's a pleasure to actually have a conversation about pigs. The industry has been gaining traction quite a bit over the years. So currently, in the last 5 years or so, the numbers of pigs farmed in Kenya have grown by about 50%. I think the current statistics that we have in the country are that the pig population
Right,
is at
let's,
about...
I'm informed we need to sort out your mic so that Kenyans can hear exactly what you're saying nicely. I will throw the same question to you, Dr. Yamo, please.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Thanks, Betty. I think as Dr. Sigadi has been saying, pig farming has continued to grow. Many years ago, we used to have a little bit of pigs, and people didn't understand how pig production and consumption. However, over the last 5 years, pig production has grown. A few years back, when we did some survey with FAO, it was said that the average that Kenyans eat about 14 kilos of meat per year, per person per year. And out of that 14 kilos per person per year, pig was just about 2%. Gradually, what consumption has to be. If you are driving around, you can see we are beginning to have pig butcheries, pig eateries, just a sign that people are beginning to go towards that meat as for consumption. And I think partly is driven by the fact that people believe that pig is healthier than, but Sharon will tell you that they actually all red meat. There's no classical difference.
Okay.
So essentially, pig farming is growing and consumption is growing, and that's why there's International Pig Day on Saturday, just to look at what is happening in the industry, to drive a bit of consumption, but also to look at the pig itself. As we use the pig, are there certain things that we need to be looking at and laying emphasis on? Example, the welfare of that animal.
Right, which we shall be discussing at length during this conversation. Zigadi, now let me bring you in, Daktari.
Yes.
He said that pig meat is also red meat.
Yes, for sure. Pig meat is also red meat. Yeah, there's always a misconception that it's white meat, just because the color usually is slightly lighter when you compare it to beef or other sources of meat that we have in the country. Yes, but it's definitely red meat.
Right.
Yeah, but
now,
very nutritious.
And very tasty, I must say. Yes, so you were sharing with us your thoughts about pig farming and your experience in it.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for about 18 years, straight out of college, and decided this is the line I want to focus on. So I've actually seen the industry grow from the time I joined the profession up to where we are right now. I think as Farmers Choice, I started off with Farmers Choice, and at the time they were carrying about 60% of the pig herd in the country. Right now, farmers are holding possibly about 80%, and we are only doing about 20%. So it's been a space that it has been, amazing to watch grow, getting farmers to actually appreciate what they can do with pigs or what they can get out of pigs in the way of building their livelihoods and actually a sustainable livestock farming. So yeah, the space is growing. There's still room for more. Demand is increasing, as Daktari has mentioned. Kenyans, do I say, tastes are changing, and we are seeing more and more consumption of pork. Yeah. So the National Pig Day is, I think this is the first time we are making it a big deal in the country.
Right.
But it's just to create awareness to Kenyans and say we are here. Pig is an alternative source of protein that is very tasty, as you said, and readily available throughout the country. Yeah, the farmers who are doing it, I think, are enjoying pig farming. Pigs reproduce or replicate very quickly, so you get your returns very quickly. They get to market at about 5 months, 6 months if taken care of properly. Disease challenges are there, but to a minimum. But yeah, it is actually an industry that I am encouraging a lot of people to get into if they have the space. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Farming,
yes.
the final product always is dependent on the entire stage,
Yes.
From the time when the animal is, do we call it conceived?
Yes.
Yeah, we can start there.
Yeah, we can start there.
Yes.
By the time you're eating your meat, that quality starts way far back there.
Yes.
So I would like Dr. Yamo to take us through, you can also chime in, whenever you're ready, to take us through that procedure, how to ensure that by the time you are getting ready for the market, how do you have a healthy and quality animal?
Thank you, Betty. Very good question, and I think this is where not only pigs but the whole animal production industry is going into, because people are realizing that animals are actually sentient beings, and sentient simply means they feel, they can understand and relate to an environment and what has happened to them. And that is why over the last couple of years a lot of emphasis in production system has been on animal welfare, because if you take care of the welfare of that animal, it is able to produce optimally. We normally say a happy animal is a happy producer. You get more productivity, but you also get a better quality product. And so in terms of welfare, if I can just use that term, of that animal, there are 5 fundamental things that we look at. And if you go into welfare, they'll tell you, don't say animal rights, because as welfare fellows, we say animals don't have rights. They have fundamental freedoms. And there's a classical difference there. The people who tell you not to eat meat, animals should be left, no experiments, are people who believe in animal rights, and that's an extreme position. The midway position, which is where we work with industry, is that animals have fundamental rights. There are 5 critical ones. I'll just go through them quickly. The first one is freedom from hunger and thirst, which is to say an animal must get food that meets its physiological need. And that just simply means the way you treat the food you give a baby is different from what you and I as adults eat. The same applies to animals. There are various stages of feeds that they're supposed to be given, which meets nutritional requirements. A growing animal needs more proteins. An older animal like you and I needs more carbohydrate or energy sources, and that's the difference. So that's why if you go to the market, you'll find a starter, a grower, and a finisher diet in whichever animal you're looking at. So that's the critical thing. But the biggest thing from my experience in industry is that people forget that this thing called water is the biggest thing that you need to be looking at. If you don't have water, the animal cannot convert the feed that you're giving it. It will not even eat enough, and that's where the problem starts. In terms of food safety, if the water is contaminated or the feed is contaminated, your end product will be contaminated. And what I think Kenyans need to understand is that whatever you give that animal ultimately gets onto your plate. And I usually use a very simple example. If maize goes bad in Betty's village, the most likely thing is they'll give it to animals, the chicken or something. True. That's what you do. But the reason why you don't want to eat that maize will affect that animal. So if it's mycotoxins, those toxins will affect the animal. Certain animals even react more severely than you and I react to that mycotoxin. But that mycotoxin will also end up in the meat, the egg, the milk. And that is part of what now Kenya Bureau of Standards look at. With that product, is it wholesome? Does it have antibiotics if you fed it antibiotics? Does it have mycotoxin if the maize was rotten? Does it have contamination because we collected water from a place that was not acceptable? So the rule of thumb we usually say is if you can't drink the water, don't give it to the animal. Yeah. So one of the things farmers know YAMO for is when you get into the chicken house, you must drink the water, or the pigsty. You must drink the water you are giving it, or taste the food. Yes. So that's the first one. The second one is freedom from discomfort. You can see we are sitting here in a very comfortable environment. The lights might be disturbing some of us, but that's okay. The same applies to the animal. If the ventilation is poor, or there's too much ammonia because the droppings are not being cleaned, then that gives a problem, and that is your beginning of your disease problems. Because hygiene and sanitation, good, comfortable environment is critical. One of the things I learned when I started working with pigs, not as long ago as Sharon here, is that pigs are the cleanest animals, by the way.
Contrary to
popular opinion. Pigs are the cleanest animals. They are the only animals that when you put them in a pen, they will designate a corner for their bathroom business
and another corner for sleeping.
And they will never mix the two. The chickens will do their business everywhere, same to cows. So that environment is so important. Is it good ventilation? Is it clean so that there's no contamination? Is it spacious so that they're not on top of each other? Remember the days of COVID spaces. The spacing is the same thing. In animals, we have what you call stocking density. How many animals can you fit in a place? Farmers have this misconception that I can put as many animals. The more animals you have, if they're beyond a certain capacity, you're even stressing the animals, so their capacity to produce goes down. So that's the second. The third one is freedom from pain, injury, and disease, which essentially says you need to ensure the animal does not get sick. Part of it is hygiene. How clean is that house? The farmhand who's going inside there, is he clean? Does he have clean overalls? Is he, because he's going to handle feed, if he's contaminated, his hands are dirty, it will get into the feed, it ends up in the animal, it becomes a human problem. Is the animal vaccinated? Because part of what people say, we have to vaccinate. So just like a child, all animals have a vaccination program, and in the pig industry there is certain diseases we must vaccinate. I know you know the story of vaccinations in cows recently. So that's part of the process. There's no difference. There's certain things we vaccinate animals for two reasons. One is for disease control. There are diseases that are zoonotic. That is why I work for a One Health organization that move from animals to humans and vice versa. Anthrax is a good example. So if you don't manage it at animal systems, it explodes in human systems and it's a major problem. Then there are also trade-sensitive disease. Sharon will tell you there are diseases, if they get, that international market they are looking for will not buy that product. Not even get it in their establishment. Even just a rumor that there was an outbreak of a certain disease
closes the market.
Closes the market. So that is part of the reason why we must handle diseases critically. But remember that freedom is about ensuring the animal is not pained. So it's freedom from pain, injury, and disease. We need to look at how we transport animals. I know if you go to some of our villages, you find pigs tied behind a motorbike. That pig is not fit for human consumption because it has had certain chemicals going through the system, hormones that are working, that then spoils the quality of that meat. In one of the research we've done both in pigs and chickens, we have realized that a lot of problems, the farmer does a good job, but transport to market becomes an issue. Because if the pig gets a scratch or an injury, at the processing plant, they must cut that out. And that is lost to farmers. And in the last one, we looked at one of the local slaughterhouses. They are losing 2 kilos per animal. 2 kilos at 300 shillings, 400 shillings per animal is significant. And that is where farmers start losing. That's why we are now talking about animal welfare, so that farmers look at how do I transport this animal? How do I do certain things? Then there's freedom to express natural behavior. Essentially, an animal should be an animal. If it's a chicken and it patches, it should be allowed to patch. If it's a dog that needs space to walk, it should be given that space to walk. If it's a pig that roots, it should be the litter in the house should give it that capacity to root and to exploit environment. If you don't do that, The animal is stressed because it's dull, it's not active. You end up with poor productivity.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the last one is freedom from stress, distress, and freedom from distress, essentially. And essentially, we are saying don't stress the animal in any way. Anything that causes stress will lead to a drop in production. And so for animal welfare, that's what we are looking at. And those things have moved to a stage where it's now an ISO standard. Sharon will tell you that these days, even industry, the fast food restaurants and the supermarkets asking for animal welfare standards. They're even audited for animal welfare, whether their standards reach certain animal welfare standards. That is the critical thing that part of International Pig Day is about, is that welfare of the animal. Is it being catered for? Because if it's not being done properly, there's a capacity to lose high-value markets, especially the big hotels and fast food restaurants in this country.
Right. Let's bring in Dr. Sigadi into the conversation. We know that there have been consignments of Kenyan produce from the agriculture sector that have been stopped from entering other markets because of standards. So focusing on pig farming, please do tell us how farmers ensure that this is not affected. There's the overuse of antibiotics that has been a problem. So please, go ahead.
Asante, the international market or the world market is where I believe all farmers are looking to. And I think the pig industry as well, consumption in Kenya is low, but in other parts of the world it's quite high. So our production is targeted, yes, to meet the local consumption, but also open up markets for farmers, and including Farmers' Choice. As Victor said, welfare is key. It's one of the aspects of pig production. But the other thing we also look at is breeds. What kind of breeds are you using to produce? So looking at where you're sourcing your animals from becomes important. The detail of it, basically, you're just looking at the breed determines the quality of the meat, the productivity of the animal. It comes into health as well. There's selections that have been done to promote disease resistance. So when you're looking at the breeds, that is all factored into. He's talked about feeds again. The different types of feed determine the quality of meat at the end of the day. So anything that goes into the feed has to be looked at keenly. The vaccination he's talked about also comes into play. So at the end of the day, when you put all this together, then coupled with management, and I think that is where we are now trying to create awareness and say, guys in the animal health industry, there's space here to actually contribute positively to the pig industry. Because it's been a very small industry, so a lot of focus has not been on the pig. And you'll find diseases that are out there that maybe the animal health practitioners are not too sure how to handle and all. So we are saying this is there. Open up your minds to also now encompassing the pig. So if you get all this together, then the international markets are open to us. There are two diseases of economic importance in the country that what Victor was alluding to, that you can actually get borders closed the moment they are mentioned. There's one particular disease called African swine fever that is endemic in the region. There's a foot and mouth as well. So for pigs, what we actually try and do is what we call biosecurity. You're ensuring that your pigs are kept in we call them, like, I'll just say a closed herd, where you're managing your animals such that you're controlling any visitors coming onto the farm, you're controlling the quality of the feed, you're controlling, to some extent, even the air that they're coming into. When you're introducing new animals, you're making sure that where they're coming from is a disease-free area or zone, or certain diseases are not in that area. So if you practice all those things, then the international markets would be open to us as well. So put that together with the welfare and the quality where the breed starts, then you have a quality product that you can actually put in the market and compete with anywhere else in the world.
Right.
Yes.
One of the biggest challenges that farmers have been facing across board has been the cost of feed.
Yes.
How is the cost of feed for pigs, and that coupled with the capital required to actually get into pig farming. Please do take us through that, so that I mean, at the end of the day, we want a good bottom line,
At the end of the day, we're in it as a business. True.
So how is that looking like?
Feed is a constant conversation, I will call it that, because it accounts for between 70 to 80% of production cost in the pig industry. And poultry as well. I think those are the two industries that are always hit the hardest when there are issues with feed. One of the main reasons why feed is so costly in Kenya is because we compete with the raw materials used in pig feed, poultry feed, compete with human requirements. So when you're talking about maize, whatever maize we produce is required for human consumption and required for animal feed as well. So at the moment, I think in the animal industry, the last statistics were saying that we require maybe about 3 million kilos of maize per year for the animal feed industry. So if we can't produce that locally, automatically the prices go up. The other thing that has hit the country is we trend to think it doesn't affect the animal industry, but it does climate change. So you see, as much as we are currently, the conditions are very dry. We are struggling to source for things like maize. About a year ago, we were paying 30 shillings per kilo of maize. Now it's gone up to about 53 shillings. Yeah, so the key area that we are starting to say, can we look at animal feed separately from human feeds in terms of even taxing and what? If we were to import maize, yeah, could we have something separate from maize? If we are growing maize in Kenya locally, there is an aspect that we could consider something like yellow maize for animal feed and keep white maize for human consumption. So these are discussions that are constantly happening. We use wheat as well, wheat and wheat byproducts in animal feed. World market prices go up because a lot of our wheat is imported as well. Then again, feed costs go up. So it's a constant conversation. I know through various associations, through the ministry, we are actually trying to just get the message to the government that we actually need to focus on this. Because if that is not sorted out, then at the end of the day, food on the table becomes very expensive. Right. And that kills the industry before we even start talking. Yeah, so that is a key, how do I say it, pressing point for the pig industry and the livestock industry as a whole. Yes.
Dr. Yamo, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we need to look at our financial bills and our tax regimes, because I think part of it is the tax that comes into play when you are in the products used in milling feeds, and which is a discussion we've had for many years. I come from the chicken industry, it's a constant discussion, and that's partly why you find our products slightly more expensive compared to even our immediate neighbors, because that tax is a bit different. And then again, the aspects of exactly where do we grow this maize, because I think a land use policy is critical. Because at this point in time, we seem to be moving into the highly productive areas of this country. I think the other thing from my end of the world, which is really going to affect us, is urbanization in this country, because we have 47 counties. Each is trying to build. I know one which is building a totally new capital city from what used to be there. And that is going into land which is arable, and that is essentially going to give us drama. In our neighboring counties, many years ago when I worked for the chicken industry, a few years ago when I went back to the same farmers that I used to work with in our neighboring county, 60% of them had left chicken production. And their excuse was, Daktari, it is easier to build a flat and collect rent than to grow food. I think these are things that Kenyans need to critically look at, because what are we saying? If we are not ready to conserve our agricultural land and use it for food production, somebody else will feed us. And sometimes I feel a bit challenged, because Kenyans are saying eggs are coming from Uganda, milk is coming from the neighbors. But the question I pose is, what is our strategy around this thing if our arable land is being converted into buildings? It simply means food must come from somewhere. So that is something that we need to discuss. I think we need to have a clear, I've been to Zambia, which is a good example I give. There are very areas that are designated for production of maize for the feed industry. And that maize is specifically yellow maize, which Sharon will tell me adds color to the fat, etc. Looks a better product. So those are the things we are missing. We end up, the feed industry is running around on byproducts, byproducts of milling, byproducts of oil cakes, byproducts of this. We are not really strategically thinking about it, and it's a discussion that we need to have sooner than later. Otherwise, we will not be competitive regionally.
When you listen to the issue of land use, I mean, it seems there's a lot of work that needs to be done from even the county government side, right? Is this something that they are cognizant about, or we are just concerned with beautifying the urban areas in the devolved units? I'll start with you, Sigadi.
Personally, I think we need to take a step. We've had a constitution for the last 25, this is the 25th year.
Yeah.
We need to take a step and ask ourselves exactly what are we trying to do? Because my feeling is we chase politics and forget the critical things. Yeah? If I was going to have a mkutano somewhere for politics, people will come. But when I say, let's have a discussion around pig production in this country, I get a very few people,
very small
number of
turnout.
people.
Yes.
And that to me is where we are losing it, the battle, because we are then just saying we'll be fed from elsewhere. Then we need to ask ourselves, what is our plan? I know Nairobi, zone Nairobi so that certain places it went, I am not very sure. And that's a discussion we should have nationally. I think the National Land Commission needs to be very clear which land is where and what is it being used for. Otherwise, we'll end up in situations where we are losing arable land to other things. And then climate change is making the thing even more complex because the traditional, if I go back to my village, the traditional 2 rain season is no longer there. We are not sure when it starts and when it ends. And those things then have an impact on not only livestock production, but food crop security. Production and food security.
Right. Sigadi, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
No, it is a real concern.
Right.
In fact, I think I would even encourage youth. You know, there's a tendency of people to move away from professions that are related to the agricultural industry and what. So it would be great to actually come back to that conversation and know that it is important to feed the nation, to feed the people, have food security. Because certain things like now, maize, we get majority of our maize from our neighbors. Yeah, whether it's for human consumption or animal feed, a big percentage comes from the region as opposed to what we are producing locally. I think what Victor mentioned, there's a lot of politics that has gone into that. And by the time the farmer is producing a bag of maize, you can't even afford it. Yeah, and those are the things that anyone looking into pig farming would be thinking, okay, what is the capital outlay I require to get into pig farming? And usually the first thing is like, where is my source of food?
Right.
Or feed for the pigs.
Yeah.
If I can't guarantee that, then pigs don't graze like cows, where you'd say I have an alternative, I'll bring in hay or something. And it is a conversation, serious one, that we need to have. And we've been trying to drive that through various avenues, and hopefully we'll be successful at the end of it.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, that again makes us more competitive now in the market out there. Because I would just say currently out there, you can't, if you go to the market, compare Kenyan pork, Brazilian pork, American pork, you're like, okay, what is it? And ours is known for its quality and what, even our sausages, the taste and everything. So it is a conversation we seriously need to have as a country. Yes.
One of the things that the international market always looks at is traceability.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I would like to understand, for the sake of the viewers, what exactly is traceability and how is it achieved? Let's start with you, Dr.
You have to start with me. It's good you started with me. I think, let me say it easy. It's the easiest way to say to explain traceability is if I went to the supermarket down the road and picked a piece of chicken or a piece of pork, I should be able to see, by just the batch number that's on that product, I should be able to call Sharon and she should be able to even tell me the truck that carried the maize that went into the feed mill.
Oh.
That is what we are looking at.
That went into the animal.
That's far back. So when people see this concept, and let me make it easier for Kenyans, when you see people talking about farm to fork, that's a traceability standard, because we are saying on that fork, if we asked you this piece of meat, batch number this, what vaccine was given, who gave it, when was it given, which feed was it using, that feed, where did the maize come from, where did the genetics come from, etc. You will be able to do. So it's a system that has been built over the year where everything that goes into that product is traceable.
Right. Let me just stop you right there. Put a pause on it.
Yes.
We shall continue that conversation on traceability in a little bit. But first, let me take you to Lamu County, where President William Ruto is launching the off-grid solar access project. Let's listen into that.
Kazi yote mimi nashughulikia kwa sababu ndio kubadilisha taifa letu la Kenya. Hakuna vile taifa hili linabadilika kwa sababu nyingine, ni kwa sababu na kwa taratibu ya mipango ya maendeleo ya taifa letu la Kenya. Ndio nawauliza ninyi watu wa hapa Ndao na watu wa Lamu hii, jameni, tuungane na tushirikiane. Umoja ni nguvu, kutengana ni udhaifu. Musikubali tutenganishwe na ukabila na chuki na migawanyiko. Hapo tutaharibu mpango na taratibu ya transformation ya taifa letu la Kenya. Na msiwajali wale matapeli, wale wachache ambao hawana mpango. Nimejaribu kuwasikiza kwa makini. Wale wanaongea kwenye mitandao, wanaongea kwenye maredio, wanazungusha maneno kwenye magazeti. Nimejaribu kuwasikiza kwa makini hawa watu wako na mpango gani. Ati mpango yao yote eti ni kumuondoa Ruto. Hawana mpango nyingine yoyote. Hawana sera, hawana mpango, hawana maoni, hawana maono, hawana chochote. Niwaambie wale, mwenye kuweka viongozi na kuwaondoa ni Mwenyezi Mungu, sio nyinyi. Nyinyi msijisumbue kupanga kabila hii na kabila ile, kupanga huyu na yule, kupanga haya na yale. Nyinyi tafuteni sera. Hapa tunazungumzia barabara kwa majina, nyinyi mnaongea ukabila kwa majina. Hapa tunapanga mambo ya maji na stima na social housing na affordable housing na kuunganisha hawa wananchi stima. Ndio ya muhimu. Tupange ajira ya hawa vijana, Kenya isonge mbele. Nyinyi hamuwezi kuturudisha nyuma kwa migawanyiko na ukabila na mambo ya duni. Na wauliza ndugu zangu watu wa Lamu, na wauliza ndugu zangu watu wa Ndao, Kenya hii ni inchi yenye.
Well, that is President William Ruto speaking in Lamu County, where he is launching the off-grid solar access project. And of course, our reporters are on the ground and they shall be bringing us details as to what that particular event will bring forth in our subsequent bulletins. In studio, we continue with our conversation on matters pig farming. And this conversation is with Dr. Victor Yamo, who is the CEO of Global One Health Advocacy Alliance, as well as Dr. Sharon Sigadi, who is the General Manager at of Rosemark Division at Farmers Choice Limited. Asanteni for staying with me. Right, Dr. Yamo, before we went to Lamu, you were talking to us about traceability and what it is.
So as I was explaining, it's about knowing exactly what goes into a product so that you're able to trace in case there's any challenges we can identify. But for me, I think the important thing is for people, the farm to fork or traceability thing is about certain aspects of disease control. Because if you go back to disease, we want to know where did the disease come from. Let me give you a good example. COVID-19, it was said it came from a wet market in a place called Wuhan in China. They were able to narrow that down. That's exactly what we are trying to say. But it's not, traceability is not only about tracing the potential disease problems. It's also about managing what is going into a product. You know that this quality of maize is going into this product. You know that this quality of product. You also know which genetics is going, so that you're able to manage the whole process until the end, so that you are able to continuously have some improvements as you go along. But for animals, it's also about confirming that the animals that I sell to Farmers Choice, for instance, are actually Yamos. I did not go and borrow my neighbors and sold it. So we have had a long time ago, let me say, long time ago we had situations where we had pig farmers or predominantly dairy farmers when I worked for another organization, where there were dairy farmers who were supplying big processors with milk, but they had no milk.
They had no cows. They had no cows, right?
And those are the things that the traceability is trying to look at, so that we are able to confirm that farmer X, who delivered pigs to Farmer's Choice actually did have pigs, and she has gone through this process. Part of traceability is about record keeping. We can go to the farmer and say, you have delivered 20 baconers. What did you feed them on? And you can easily see whether they actually has, because of the feed meet a certain level. But maybe Sharon,
yes, I'd like to hear yes, how exactly this is achieved, practically.
Because like on our farms, we have our own farms as Farmer's Choice with about 25,000 pigs. So, and we also work with farmers who hold another, I'll call them another 3,000 sows or 3,000 to 5,000 sows. So usually how we do our operations, you standardize. So for every operation on the farm, there's a standard operating procedure. Anyone walking in understands this is where I'm supposed to start if I'm dealing with a sow, a female that is pregnant, or one that is nursing, or a piglet that is 5 weeks old. Right from the time of how are they feeding, what kind of temperature are they supposed to be in, how much water are they supposed to drink, which vaccinations, deworming. In case we have a sick animal, how do you treat it? You mentioned antimicrobial resistance at some point. If I'm giving medication, which medication, how long is the withdrawal period, and that is all recorded like he's mentioning. So that is where it starts. And then there's a lot of training that we also do for our farmers. And in those trainings, we are now also trying to tell them, these are the best genetics, this is how you keep them, this is how you feed them, and at the end of the day, this is what you expect to get, and the animals come to us and we can be like, okay, good, at least we have an idea of how the animals were produced to the point they came to the slaughterhouse. So it's basically just about standardizing, creating awareness, and supporting the farmers through the process of producing the pigs. Yes.
So when you are trying to now access those export markets,
yes,
and they request for traceability, whatever you call it,
yes,
how do you prove that?
What he said, okay, for example, when a farmer is bringing 20 pigs to Farmer's Choice, first of all, they start by getting what we call a movement permit from the veterinarian in their area. Yes. So that requires that the vet has certified that the animals, first of all, are free from disease. Yeah, so they can be transported to slaughter. So we start there. Then when the farmer is required to actually have a specialized mark or number that goes onto the animal to identify it. So either you can use something, we call it like a slap mark, which is basically a temporary number that is put on the animal when it's coming into slaughter. You can get to the point where you're tagging the animals, or you have chips on them or something. So that just ties back that farmer to the animal to the specific farmer. And if you want any information, you can now go back to that farm. That now coupled with what the government is doing in terms of the veterinary services of moving the permits. And then for us as an organization, the farmers that we work with, now the practices that we give them through our extension team, then we are sure that at least these have been implemented on the animals that are coming to us. Yeah, so it's just a constant conversation with the farmers and constant visit, because we do quite a bit on the extension side with the pig farmers who are contracted by us.
Right.
Yes.
We shall talk about that challenge of extension services in Kenya, right, in just a little bit.
Yes.
Let's go to Kisumu County, where Wycliffe Okech is standing by with a pig farmer to just get his experience and his challenges as he does the pig farming. Wycliffe, do take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Betty, from Nairobi. You've mentioned it right, that right next to me is a pig farmer. He is called Christopher Okeyo, and he has alluded to me that this is a venture that he started that is back in 2020 during the corona period. Now that's about 5 years down the line, and straight away I am going to engage Christopher to share with me the insights into this venture, the inspiration, the motivation, the benefits, the challenges, and what is his plans going forward. Christopher, straight away, look into the camera. Talk to us this morning. Our viewers would want to know what inspired you to venture into piggery, or rather pig farming, and tell us, how has it fared so far?
Yes, rightly as you put it, I'm Christopher Okeyo, and I hail from Karateng in Kisumu County. I'm a pig farmer and a businessman. I'm doing this pig for business. I started back in 2020 June at the peak of coronavirus and the lockdowns. Now, what inspired me to do piggery was the urge to have something, a venture that can stand the test of time, whether there is pandemic or not. And you will agree with me that there is no day anyone will miss to eat, whether there is lockdown or not. It was at a time when we were employed. I was a teacher at a school. Everything had gone to zero, no earning, and then I was left with some cash, around 3,000, that I said, okay, if I look back to my ancestry, my grandfather and my grandmother were real farmers. So what if I carved out a venture out of that history from the grandparents and do something that can earn me income? Now, so far, so good. We started with 3 pigs back in 2020. Right now we are doing over 40 pigs here. That is around 11 mothers and around 31 piglets. It's not been a journey of process. It's a journey of what I call opportunities to learn. I don't want to call them mistakes. And right now I can say that I have a content on where I should be heading to. If I don't repeat myself, we have been trying to come up with a sustainable way of bringing our pigs so that when we are selling at the market there, we are able to win, especially in terms of getting profits for the business and also giving our clients a value for their money. Right now we are doing integration of feeds. We have feeds that we buy from feed manufacturers, and we also have our own feed that we make from waste, from food waste. And it is what I'm carrying the best in here, called black soldier fly larva. So we came up with a research when feeds were skyrocketing, and said, no, we are not going to leave this venture because people will not stop eating. We have to come up with something that is sustainable, that is produced at a very low cost and doesn't compromise on the quality of feed we give to our pigs. So in the morning, we normally give our pigs black soldier fly maggots, and then in the afternoon at around 3, they are really fighting for the few that have dropped down. To me, that is why you see I'm almost falling. Yes, so in the afternoon at around 3, we give them the feeds that have been formulated and manufactured by reputable companies in the country.
Christopher, let me just cut you short, but sorry for that. Yes. Is this something that anyone can just venture into, or it requires technical knowledge? And if so, you told us you are a teacher. Where did you get the knowledge to start this and mold it all through to this level?
Yes, thank you very much. Now, for you to start any agribusiness venture, you need 2 things. The first thing is you need something in your hand, and the other one, you need something in your head. The 2 go parallel. You cannot leave one and go for the other one. So we started by, first of all, benchmarking from people who had already done this business, see what are their flaws, what are their successes, and how can we juxtapose that and bring something that is working for us. Yes, I am a teacher, so that has also helped me in navigating through the likes of YouTube to gain much knowledge onto starting this. And what I can say has really helped me too. I've been able to underscore the need to have quality feed going hand in hand with quality breed. You need quality breed and quality feed for you to succeed in piggery.
Yes. Quality breed and quality feeds. Yes. And in that case, I'm going to ask about the extension services. Where do you get your extension services? Does the county government of Kisumu, because right now we are in Kisumu, does the county government of Kisumu come through for you by providing this technical knowledge through the extension officers?
Yes, I'll be very honest. I'll put an honest lens in this. We are hoping that we will be getting extension services from the county government of Kisumu, but so far, honestly, we've not received any. But we are optimistic that one day or one time they will be passing by to give us the insights on what we are doing badly.
Earlier on, you mentioned that it is not all rosy doing all this, and since 2020 through to 2025, that's about 5 years. Some of the critical challenges that you can note along the way?
Yes, the first challenge, and I learned it the hardest way, was to go into this with the mindset of making money quickly. So what we did, we concerted resources and went to buy piglets from a farmer that was selling them at a throwaway price of 2,000. And we took around 40 piglets there. By that time, we had not even planned about on how we are going to get our food bank. We were not even sure what we are being given at F1. So that really dealt as a big blow. We have learned from it, and that is the main challenge that has really affected us, but we learned from it.
And I'm so sure you have even bigger plans to grow your venture even into a bigger size. Which other requirements, or rather, which assistance will you require, and from where? So for you to move this venture from this level to the next.
You are very right. If you just check at the back there, I have a group of boys who are almost getting through with their school, and they are looking forward to me to creating for them an employment. In fact, they're going through the curve. So I want by 2027 to have at least 3 houses like the one that we are in here, so that we can keep at least 300 pigs. And by this, if I say I'm going to do it alone, that can be over-ambitious. We are working on our finances so that we'll be able to get loans from the financial institution to grow this business. We are also pitching to various NGOs that are operating in Kenya and supporting youths in agribusiness. Yes, and we are also hoping that our customers, because those are the first people who are bailing us out, will be giving us more and more business opportunities.
All right. Even as we head towards the end of this interview, tell us, which are your buckets? Do you sell them as they are? Or, I mean, how do you make money from this? And what message do you have for those, for anyone who will be looking to venture into this sort of initiative?
Yes, there are 2 questions there. So the first thing is that we have really been dynamic on our market approach. We started by buying 3-month-old piglets and then fattening them, then selling at porkers. We saw the profits, and we also saw what we can improve on there. Right now, this year, we are focusing on selling quality piglets. And quality here means that we went for mothers, and then we are buying quality semen from reputable companies, so that what we are giving to the market there is above par. So that is our market approach going forward. I want to encourage anyone who would wish to venture into agribusiness value chain, especially piggery, to go for it, because that is it. Pigs, I can compare them with a type of poultry bird called broiler. They have a very high conversion of feed when you give them. You give them quality feed and their quality breed, within 6 months you're selling a pig not less than 20,000. Tell me any business that can give you return as fast as that. Right. Yes.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Betty, it is a conversation that I wish could continue, but then I know we are constrained by time, and we'll be able to continue this off air so that we can get a detailed report regarding this sort of venture that Christopher embarked on at the height of the COVID-19. And he has been pushing through. This is 5 years down the line, and he hopes that his venture will just grow, continue growing even bigger. And something he has mentioned is about thinking outside the box. And for this venture, it's about quality feeds for quality breed. And he has also talked about how YouTube and knowledge that is out there on the internet has come through for him to navigate this sort of venture. Well, I know we are constrained by time, and by that, Betty, let me hand it back to you in studio to continue that show from the other end.
Thank you very much, Wycliffe Okech. Quite an interesting conversation, and he has been very honest about him getting into the business, thinking that he'll make money immediately, but, you know, things proved to be a bit different. Thank you so much, Wycliffe, for that conversation. Well, we continue in studio with our conversation here, and I would really like to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, he also mentioned extension services as quite a challenge. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that conversation with the pig farmer, Christopher. I'll start with you, Dr. Sigadi.
No, kudos to Christopher.
Right.
I was actually, I'm quite impressed with his setup, with how he seems to have, figured out a way on minimizing his cost, because one of the highest costs in animal feed is protein. And protein sources, usually we either use soya or fish meal to actually provide the protein. So the costs have really escalated in the last 5 years, and hence people look into alternatives like the black soldier fly he mentioned as a source of protein. Breeds he mentioned as a very key investment when you're going into pig farming. So at least we are seeing farmers are now aware that if you want to succeed, breeds is one of your key things. Feed as well is important, he's mentioned to that, but where he's saying is lacking is the extension education or services.
Right.
And what we've found generally, I'll speak now as Farmer's Choice, is that yes, we have an extension team, but with the industry growing so fast, we are not able to cover 100% the farmers out there. So it would be really great if the government, county or national government can also pick up and help us with the extension services as well. Yes.
Right. Dr. Yamo, thoughts on that, and especially the extension services, that challenge?
Great. I think it's a good question we've grappled with for a while, having been a chairman of the Veterinary Association and the board. The reality is that counties are not doing the right thing. Counties are not recruiting the extension services. And from a One Health perspective, broadly, the reality is that we will not solve our health issues until we solve our food issues. That's the harsh reality that this country has not understood. We cannot have a discussion about medical services and leave veterinary services out of it. Because all the problems that end up in your medical facility are coming through animals and poor extension services. In fact, we need to move away from what we are currently doing, curative medicine, back to preventive medicine. And that is where our challenge is, because if you do not sort out and get enough extension personnel to go onto the ground, explain to the farmer that you do not need to give an animal antibiotics in the name of preventing a disease, you just need a clean environment, you need to give it good quality food, good clean water, and then allow it to grow. That is where the challenge is. And so we find farmers doing a lot of tricks. Last year, I had the opportunity with a team of us to do what we call a knowledge, attitudes, and practices survey across 9 counties, looking at poultry, pigs, and dairy farmers. And one of the biggest things is exactly what Christopher was talking about, the feed quality. And so farmers have gone into other things. At least I'm happy him is talking about black soldier fly, which is something that people are looking at. But in some of the counties, people are talking about waste products coming from hotels, coming from restaurants. And in certain places, in one of the counties that I will not mention here, they're even looking at medical waste because it's still biological products. And that is the problem we are having. So until you go down and sit with a group of farmers, this is a survey that you don't want to do because farmers have also become intelligent. So if you ask them, what do you do, they'll tell you the correct answers. But when you sit with them, they quickly start saying, no, but we collect waste products from the dump site. And there we find everything, medical waste, anything, and a pig can eat anything. Because the farmer has not connected. The farmer has not connected that thing that is feeding that animal will end up on the table. We have counties in this country where, because of poor extension services, people want to make quick bucks. We have dead animals getting into our food chain. An animal dies. The other cases you are hearing about, most of them are cases where the veterinary officer has buried the animal, but people go and exhume the animal because they must eat meat.
Wow.
And those are the reasons why we need to go back and start educating. And so for me, my cry, I hear Christopher, I think part of our problem is we Kenyans. You and I don't go to budgeting processes, so county governments are putting budget money into other things instead of going and saying, if Christopher and a group of farmers went and said, in Kisumu County next year we want you to employ for us 3 extension officers,
right,
it will go into the budget.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll give Dr. Sikadi 1 minute to say your closing remarks. I'll take those as your closing remarks.
Thank you.
No, I'll close by saying that the pig is a wonderful animal. It sounds crazy. You said initially, I think Victor is the one who pointed to it, that they are considered to be dirty and everything. But they actually are very clean animals, very intelligent, able to engage with us. And as we commemorate World Pig Day, I would say to a lot of the Kenyans listening to us, the industry, the government, to actually have another look at the pig industry because of the growth it's going. With the urbanization, reduced land size, pigs are the only ones that replicate fast enough to be able to help us meet our protein requirement.
Right.
Yeah, Christopher pointed out to within 6 months you have a pig that's ready for market and you're making your money, and that just translates to food for the people at a lower cost.
Thank you.
So thank you, Betty.
Thank you very much. That is Dr. Sharon Sigadi. She is the General Manager of Rosemark Division at Farmers Choice Limited, as well as Dr. Victor Yamo, CEO at Global One Health Advocacy Alliance. We have been discussing pig farming, what needs to go in for it to be a profitable venture, the challenges that the industry is facing, and of course they've talked about tax incentives required to ensure that the cost of feed comes down. Extension services, quite a big challenge across the livestock sector. That is something that, of course, county and national government needs to also tackle. Well, that is it for BizCheck this morning. Thank you very much for keeping us company. I will now hand it over to Sheila Yogo for Kurunzi Mashinani. My name is Betty Kiptum. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Bye-bye.